Hi, everybody. I'm, as I mentioned, I'm in Seoul, Korea. Here for I had a recital on Monday with Orion Weiss and two concerts with the Dresden Philharmonic on a tour. On Thursday, so tomorrow for me, I fly down to Australia to play a couple more recitals with Orion, and then back to America. And then in just a couple of short weeks, I'll be with all of you in Seattle. Um, this is, of course, a preview lecture of the main concert hall series, but I will remind you that the festival is starting really soon. It's actually starting in 2 days with the concert
Where
truck
did you say in
residency.
festival, right?
Seoul, Korea.
Oh, he's in Seoul. Oh my goodness. That had to be
So
wonderful over there. Sounds
the the concert truck programs start on June 18th, and we have actually maybe Steve can weigh in. I feel like we've got around 20 some of them. I can't remember exactly how many we have, but we have four wonderful programs with that. Our first program, which runs from June 18 to 21, is called Songs Without Words. And then we move on to a program called Opera to the Salon, and then a program called Dance, and a program called American Favorites, which runs from July 4 to 6. This is a great two piano program featuring three great pianists, actually. It's with Andrew Armstrong, Ji-won Park, and the concert truck queen, Susan Zong. Fantastic stuff with some Gershwin and other American favorites. Anyway, please do check out the website for more details about this. No matter where you are in Seattle, the truck will not be far from you, so it's well worth checking out. Then one other event to mention before the main concert hall program start, and that is Tasting Notes on July 6th. And this is going to be our third year of presenting this program in collaboration with celebrity chef and music or and food writer Kenji Lopez Alt. These performances this time are going to be at the Triple Door. And the advantage of this year over previous years is that everyone gets to eat this year. The menu is going to be terrific, and we've got music from Mozart, Beethoven, César Franck, and Maurice Ravel. So moving on to and I should mention there are two seatings or two performances that day for tasting notes. So if you don't have your tickets for that, get your tickets and arrive hungry. We start the main series on July 7th, and this is at our normal home of Nordstrom Recital Hall. This program starts with Sergei Rachmaninoff's symphonic dances for two pianos. A major component of this year's festival is celebrating America at 250. And something that I had fun with was creating programs where every program has a piece that is either written by an American, written in America, or has some connection to the United States. Now, Rachmaninoff, we don't generally think of him as an American composer, but he actually lived in Los Angeles for many years. While most of his most beloved music was written overseas, the Symphonic Dances was his first major work to be written in the United States. So this is very much an American piece of music, and one hears bits of that. I think he was kind of an interesting mix of someone who was always very much his inimitable self, but also he was a bit of a chameleon, soaking up influences from here and there. This piece was famously orchestrated later, but the symphonic dances in its original form is for two pianos, and this is with Alessio Bax and Orion Weiss, and very excited for that. The other half of that program is the string octet by Felix Mendelssohn. Now, this is one of our great staples here at SCMS. This piece famously was written when Mozart was only 16. Sorry, Mozart, Mendelssohn. When Mendelssohn was only 16 years old, Mendelssohn was really one of the most incredible artistic prodigies in history. This was a piece that was written with such incredible inspiration. It's a piece that seems to flow so naturally and so effortlessly. It's actually an incredibly complex piece of music, but absolutely brilliant, and one that we've enjoyed many times over the years. It was actually the very first piece that we recorded for commercial release, and so it's nice to bring it back as we are now launching, as I'm sure many of you know, our own in-house recording label, and our first two releases, CDs, will be available on opening night, so be sure to get your copies then. The pre-concert recital is going to be a fun one that day. It is with Milena Pajaro-Vandestadt on viola and a wonderful violinist named Chad Hoops, who is a well-known violin soloist and chamber musician, American, but it's his first time with us. He's someone that I've admired his playing for many years, and we finally had the chance to work together about a year ago. So I'm really happy that Chad is going to be joining us, and yeah, starting off with a bang with this first pre-concert recital with Milena, with music by Mozart, Benjamin Shear, and Bohuslav Martinu. Our second concert is also at Nordstrom Recital Hall on the 9th of July. The pre-concert program is going to be an introduction to a very special piece that is commissioned from a wonderful young composer named Kian Rave. This is actually our second commission from the SEMS Commissioning Club of Kian. He was commissioned back in 2023 to write a beautiful string quartet piece for us that was called The Little Things. And this is a co-commission along with the Mimir Festival from Texas, where it's a piece called A Free People, and it is very much inspired by, well, to say inspired, I mean, it uses the text of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. It's a piece in celebration of the birth of our country. It's a piece for string quartet and narrator, where you will hear the preamble, not the entire laundry list of complaints, because as we all remember from civics class, that goes on for kind of a while. But it and then the conclusion of this beautiful document that when the artistic director of the Mimir Festival and I got talking about this program with this project with Kian, we all agreed that the writing of that beautiful document is certainly art in itself. So you'll hear many of the ideas reflected in music from the voice of a young, vibrant contemporary composer. We move on to the piano trio in D minor by Felix Mendelssohn. We had Mendelssohn's octet at the concert before, a piece that was written in his youth, and the piano trio number one. Actually, both of his piano trios were from his full maturity. The octet and the piano trios are, I mean, these are really some of my absolute favorite pieces ever. And it's interesting how Mendelssohn knew exactly who he was from the moment he started composing. And, when you talk about an early Mendelssohn piece versus a late Mendelssohn piece, there's not really time-wise, sadly, there's not a whole lot of difference because he didn't live very long. But this is a work that is unquestionably it could not have been written by anyone else. The sparkle, the lyricism, something to listen for in this piece is the way that the piece is constantly in the first movement so turbulent and so virtuosic in the piano writing, but the lyrical writing is actually so long and flows in these long slower paced lines. So it's an incredible combination of material, and like a lot of pieces like this, it's so full of inspiration that it can fool you into forgetting just how brilliantly conceived and worked out it is. Mendelssohn was a true master of his craft, and his writing for all three instruments is just absolutely glorious. The piano part is particularly incredible. Won't want to miss that with Alessio Bach's playing. Program finishes with the third piano quartet of Johannes Brahms. This will actually be recorded for SEMS Records, as we are recording all three of the piano quartets as well as a piano quintet. If you were at our last signature series concert with the Brahms Piano Quintet, you probably saw all those microphones. This is with Orion Weiss, myself, Brian Chen, and Edward Aaron. Moving on to the 12th, which is our third and final program of the summer at Nordstrom Recital Hall. We start with a beautiful Haydn piano trio. It's his trio number 27 in A flat major. Now, 27 of 45. Haydn was certainly prolific, to say the least. And of these 45 trios, there is certainly an arc of development, but each one of them is really special and beautiful. And this is from an interesting time in musical history where it was written very shortly before Mozart's death, which is to say only a few years really before the sort of rise of Beethoven. This is a time where Haydn had, he had a good bunch of years left to compose, but had really reached his stride, creating the types of masterpieces that we think of today when we think of Haydn. Moves on to the piano quintet by Ottorino Respighi. This is a piece that is going to be making its concert hall debut for SEMS, but it's actually a piece that we did for our online festival. I believe it was summer of 2020 that we did this one. So the piece was introduced to me by Alessio Bax, who will be playing it again. Respighi is generally remembered for his huge orchestral tone poems, pieces like The Pines of Rome, Roman Festivals, Fountains of Rome. He wrote very little chamber music. He wrote a magnificent violin and piano sonata that we've had at SCMS on a number of occasions. And that's a piece more from his maturity. But this piano quintet is a very early piece. He had studied in Russia and came back to Italy trying to find his voice. And I think that this is it's a fantastic piece for lovers of Respighi because you see where he is going and who he is going to become, but it is also a fantastically conceived and written out piece in its own right. That program ends with the string quartet number 12 by Dvorak. This is his famous American quartet. Now, I think probably many of you know this, but Dvorak spent some very, very fertile years in America as the director of a music school in New York City. But a particularly happy period for him during his years in New York was actually a little vacation sabbatical out to a place in Iowa called Spillville, Iowa, where it was the home of a Czech community that had emigrated there. And it was during his time in Iowa that he wrote his 12th string quartet, the so-called American Quartet. This is a piece that shows in subtle ways, it shows his great love of American influence. Dvorak was, in many ways, and of course, this is why I think of him as why this became the representative American piece on the program. Not just because it has this subtitle of the American, but it was written in America, and Dvorak was a very important person in the development of American music in that he was this incredibly respected European composer. Uh, what we think of as classical art music was very much a European tradition at that time. There had been American composers, but it was thought of very much as a European tradition. And Dvorak was highly encouraging to American composers, saying that there was inspiration all around them, from Negro spirituals to Native American music, and to what had already become a synthesis of these elements with American folk music and of course all the immigration into the country in the 19th century that created this incredible melting pot for artistic ideas. So you hear some of that in Dvorak's American quartet, but at heart, of course, it is also very deeply Czech, as all his music was. The pre-concert for that day is the fabulous sonata for solo cello by Zoltán Kodály, played by Mark Kossauer. This is one of the great virtuoso tour de force pieces for solo cello. Incredibly creative writing using scordatura strings, which is to say the cello is not tuned in a traditional way. It creates incredible sounds and textures. It's going to be really something very special with an artist like Mark Hossauer playing. So don't miss that. The program for July 13 and 14, this repeats itself. July 13 is at the Vashon Center for the Arts on Vashon Island, and July 14th is on Bainbridge Island. And I'm just bringing up my screen to try to. Yeah, unfortunately, my screen says bad gateway, but I'm sure you all know what the name of the venue is on Bainbridge Island. Anyway, Bainbridge Island. So the program for the 13th and 14th, the pre-concert, I'll start with that, and that is going to be me and Amy Schwartz Moretti. We're going to play the Mozart B-flat duo for violin and viola. I'll be on viola for that. And then we're going to play a very fun thing. It's an arrangement of Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa, by a great violinist and arranger and composer named Bruce Dukoff from Los Angeles. It's a lot of fun. It's a virtuosic transcription of this great tune we all love. The program starts with a Beethoven string quartet, but not a Beethoven string quartet like we generally think of. This is not one of his celebrated quartets, but rather an arrangement that he did of his E major piano sonata, Opus 14, number 1. Around the time that Beethoven made this transcription or arrangement, a lot of his works were being transcribed for other ensembles by other composers because his music was really popular. In fact, his music was so popular around this time that when certain of his pieces were being published, like a piece like the Septet is an example of this, different bits of it were given to different printing shops because they didn't want any one person to have all of it because then they thought they would sell it on the black market. So it was very popular stuff. Anyway, Beethoven was coming across all of these arrangements of his music, and he was a famously pretty grumpy guy, and apparently he got fed up with it. And some student had shown him something, and he said, no, you're doing it all wrong. If you want to arrange one of my pieces here, I'll show you how to do it. And so he made this somewhat rare transcription of one of his own works. Not unheard of, but it wasn't something he did all that often. And interestingly, he took an E major piano sonata and arranged it in E flat for a string quartet. And if you know the if you know the piano sonata well, you would notice some significant differences, sometimes quite subtle, but always important. Little changes of dynamics, certainly at times changes in the writing, not just the accompanimental writing, but even the primary voice writing to suit the string instruments rather than writing for a piano. So it's a piece that works very beautifully on its own, but it's also a piece that is fun to listen to after exploring the piano sonata a little bit. So for those of you that are coming to that concert, it might be fun to listen to the piano sonata and become familiar with that in advance, and then see how Beethoven wrote this for different instruments. It moves on to the Serenade in C major by Erno von Dohnányi. Dohnányi as a composer, in these lectures in the past, I've gone on and on about Dohnányi because I find him to be a very, very interesting character. He was a brilliant pianist, known by many as apparently the finest pianist in all of Europe. He was a protege of Brahms. His first piano quintet was sort of taken on by Brahms and published with the support of Brahms. That launched his career. He was a very important pedagogue, ran the conservatory in Budapest. He was a conductor. His importance in the Hungarian music scene is almost impossible to comprehend. And then when life became very complicated, his story becomes very complicated. There's still a fair amount of controversy surrounding him today. To give a little Cliff Notes version of it, according to many sources, he was highly supportive of Jewish musicians in Hungary. And though he stayed in Hungary for quite a while, into the time of Nazi influence and a time of great danger for Jewish citizens, there's a lot of evidence that he fought against the persecution of the Jews, and there are some Hungarian musicians that credit him with what seems to be quite an extraordinary fact that apparently all Hungarian Jewish musicians that were connected with Dohnányi survived the Holocaust, which is quite incredible. However, there was some controversy because he did stay, and when he finally left, he just went to Austria, which was, of course, annexed anyway. He had a son who was in the German army. However, this son was actually executed for his role in the famous assassination attempt on Hitler.
Oh,
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and he,
Dohnányi.
yes, Dognani. So his reputation was systematically dismantled by the Nazis because of his work against them. And after the war, just as his reputation was beginning to uh, hopefully mend a little bit, he decided that he was going to fight against the communists, and who then dismantled his reputation again. And it was during this period that they spread a great number of stories about his supposed collaboration with the Nazi regime. Eventually, it became impossible for him to stay in Europe, and unusually enough, he moved to Tallahassee, Florida, where he taught at Florida State in Tallahassee, Florida. So go figure. Um, this Serenade in C major, in any case, getting back to that piece in question, very early piece of his. I mentioned that his first piano quintet was really the piece that launched his career. This Serenade for String Trio is it's an absolute miracle. It's an incredible piece of music, so brilliantly written for the three
A
instruments.
lot of the same components, but one has quinoa and one doesn't. That's one easy way to tell them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is someone talking to me or I? Oh, anyway, I couldn't tell who that was. Sorry, my screen is a little hard to see. Anyway, yeah, the piece is brilliantly written for three equal voices. It's a piece that many of you are familiar with because I program it over and over because I love it that much. And then we repeat the Dvorak American String Quartet, which I already spoke about. So those are going to be really fun concerts. It's our first time performing on Vashon Island and Bainbridge Island, so we're really looking forward to that. It's going to be great, great fun. I hope you can join us. Wednesday the 15th, we move over to the Maidenbauer Center in Bellevue. And we're starting that program with another string trio, and this is the first string, or sorry, the first string trio of Opus 9 of Ludwig van Beethoven. Beethoven, interestingly, decided to explore the string trio genre before getting into quartets. There's some thought that coming after Haydn and Mozart and their incredible command of the string quartet, there's some thought that Beethoven may have wanted to get a bit of a head start learning how to properly write quartets through working through the medium of a string trio.
I think you hit mute, James.
Oh my, yeah. How long have I been muted? I'm not quite sure
It
how
was
that.
just like
5 seconds,
20 seconds.
5 seconds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, well,
not long.
all right. Well, I told you a lot of interesting things. I was talking about the Beethoven String Trio, Opus 9, number one, how Beethoven, before getting into writing quartets, which of course became one of his most influential genres, he wrote a number of pieces for string trio. He wrote five string trios early in his career, the Opus 3, string trio, the Opus 8 Serenade, and the three string trios, Opus 9. And I was saying how many scholars have thought, well, because of Mozart and Haydn's mastery of the quartet, that maybe the young Beethoven wanted to get his feet wet with string trios before writing string quartets. But I've had composer friends that have told me that the only thing they find harder than writing a string quartet is writing a string trio. So go figure. This is a wonderfully optimistic and virtuosic and just beautiful piece of music that I think that the Opus 9 string trios are often thought of as one of the great crown jewels of Beethoven's early compositional life. We move on to the String Quartet, Opus 11 by American composer Samuel Barber. This is one of the great works of American chamber music. It's fantastic as a complete item, but it is most beloved for its second movement, which was arranged for orchestra as the famous Adagio for strings. This was a piece that was written in Barber's youth. It is I mean, I would be surprised if anyone on this call hasn't heard the Adagio for strings at some point, even if it's through the movie Platoon. Um, but the quartet in as a totality is a fabulous piece. Actually, another piece that we recorded for commercial release back in the early days with SCMS. The piece was written, Barber was in his mid-20s, had just graduated from the Curtis Institute, and it was really this piece that put him on the map. Toscanini actually performed the Adagio for strings, and certainly having the vote of confidence from Arturo Toscanini and the NBC Symphony Orchestra was a huge boost for the young Barber's career. That program finishes with the Piano Quartet Opus 1 by Joseph Suk. This is a piece that I love very, very much. It was written when he was only 16 or 17 years old. It was actually an assignment from Antonin Dvorak, who was Suk's teacher. The piece, Suk had written a lot of juvenilia up to this point, but he was so fond of it that he, in that bold way that 16, 17-year-olds will have, he designated this his Opus 1. And it actually became, it's an interesting story with this piece that speaks to the way that the decimation of music has changed. Is that the word? um, this piece was one of the great standard works of chamber music for decades. And then basically the publishing rights got confused in the middle of the 20th century because of course all the turmoil in Europe, and the piece went out of print and no one could get the music. And for that reason, the piece kind of fell into obscurity for quite a while. And it's only in recent decades that the piece has been republished, rediscovered, and is now finding its place again at the forefront of romantic chamber music. The pre-concert for that program is with Tessa Lark and Misha Nemirovsky, and they are going to be playing some Hungarian dances of Johannes Brahms and a fascinating and very beautiful violin sonata by Karol Szymanowski. Friday the 17th is our second program at the Meydenbauer Center. Um, that will begin with a pre-concert from violist Matthew Lipman and pianist Paige Roberts Malloy. They'll be playing music by Alan Shulman, Jesse Montgomery, and John Williams, the famous theme from Schindler's List. The main program that day starts with the piano trio by Amy Beach. Amy Beach is a fascinating character, definitely someone to spend some time researching. I find her story to be quite incredible. She really is the first, certainly the first great, notable, celebrated female American composer, but in many ways, maybe just the first really celebrated American composer of all. You'll see the opus number on this piano trio is opus 150. She wrote a lot of music, that's for sure. She was, in her early life, a fabulous pianist, kind of a piano prodigy, wrote her own music, but thought of herself first and foremost as a pianist. Then when she was 18, she married a wealthy man, quite quite a few years her senior, I think about 24 years older than her, doctor from Boston, took his name, Beach. And from that point onwards, it was the late 19th century, and being a pianist's performer was not fit for her station in life. So she really focused on composition during the years of her marriage. She apparently, I think, played two concerts a year for piano concerts, and they were just only for charity. And her pieces were under the name of Mrs. Beach. Uh, but interestingly, her husband died, and she had many many years alone afterwards, and she looked back on it as a very very happy period of her life, and it really did contribute to her finding her voice as a composer. The last probably 30 years of her life, she was very very active in the musical scene in both America and Europe, and was a great inspiration to generations of American composers, of all genders. And yeah, and her piano trio in A minor, as I said, is a very late piece of music, where you begin to hear certain 20th century influences, but ultimately she was a great romantic at heart, which you'll definitely hear in the piece. Moves on to the Violin Sonata number 1 by Johannes Brahms. That's with myself and Enon Barnaton. Uh, Brahms, he wrote a bunch of violin sonatas. They think that he probably wrote 4 violin sonatas that he ended up feeding to his fireplace, before writing 3 that have survived. This is the first of those 3. This is definitely a piece from his maturity. Um, and interestingly, he was not a great recycler of his ideas. There were some composers where they would write a nice tune and they would just keep using it over and over and over. Brahms was not like that, but it is interesting that in the last movement of this piece, he actually uses material from 2 songs that he wrote from his Opus 59. One called Rain Song, not to be confused by Rain Song by Led Zeppelin, a very different piece, and one called Lingering Sound. Now, these 2 songs actually share the same thematic material. So, again, if you are looking for a little bit of homework, take a listen to Brahms's songs. I think they're the 3rd and 4th songs from his Opus 59. But this sonata for violin and piano is Brahms at his most lyrical and just extravagantly beautiful. It's a very predominantly very gentle, very heartfelt, very deeply moving piece of music. I love it. And that program finishes with the first string quintet by Felix Mendelssohn. And it was this first string quartet was actually, it fits in an interesting spot in his compositional career, in that it was written pretty much directly after the string octet, that's on opening night, and actually right before his first string quartet, which oddly enough was published as his second string quartet. And the opus numbers are all confused because they're opposite of their actual time of composition. So it's a complicated puzzle, but all this to say that this comes from this first burst of inspiration in Mendelssohn's life, when he was embarking on these magnificent chamber music pieces with the string octet, the string quintet, the first couple of string quartets. The piece in its first version, part of the reason it has a slightly later opus number than you might expect, is he a few years after composition removed one of the movements and instead inserted an intermezzo that was written in memoriam of a dear friend of his who actually did the first reading of the original version of the piece. It's a beautiful piece, as you'd expect from Mendelssohn, full of virtuosity and inspiration and extreme beauty. Um, Sunday the 19th, sorry, I am opening this page here. The pre-concert there is going to be another introduction to one of our commissions, and this is by Juhi Bansal, a composer who was raised an Indian citizen, raised in India and Hong Kong, became an American citizen not so many years ago, and is based in California. And a really unique voice that I came across some years ago, and started the conversation with her to write a piece for us, because her music to me doesn't sound quite like anyone else, and I really admire it. She's written a piece called Echoes, Time, Horizon. And I think I'll just read her program note for this. I think would be the easiest way to speak about it. Before I read the program note, I'll mention that it makes reference to, she was sadly one of the many people that lost their homes in the California fires a few years ago. Program note: the piece I had completed just prior to beginning this one found shape and form through the overlap of stages of fire and stages of grief. In writing that piece, I remember noticing that how far ahead one can imagine an hour, a day, a week, a month changes depending on where you are in the process of moving through something difficult. This image of lines extending out into the future, shifting horizons, sat in my sketchbook unexplored in that earlier work. Echoes, Time, Horizon takes that very idea as inspiration, this image of horizons opening little by little by little, broadening from a point barely ahead of you to something further ahead. As an art form that lives also in time, we can't hear the previous moment of sound once it's gone. We haven't yet heard the next moment that's coming. I was intrigued by the possibilities of exploring sound in this way. Not just a progression or sequence or theme to move through, but something to open, shrink, expand, circle, rotate, and open again. The movement titles come from a fragment of a basho. The moon and sun are travelers through eternity. So there you go. I'm intrigued. I'm really looking forward to this, and looking forward to having the chance to talk through this piece with her for all of you at the pre-concert. And then, of course, that piece will open the program. And I should mention that this program is at Town Hall. This is the first of our 4 programs at Town Hall, Seattle. Then we then move on to the first violin sonata of Gabriel Fauré. This is a great favorite, one of the most beautiful, beautiful pieces. Fauré was not an early bloomer like a Mendelssohn or a Mozart. This piece was written when he was just about 30, and it was really the piece that put him on the map. There are funny stories about its publication. It was being published by, it eventually was published by the publishing house, famous publishing house of Breitkopf and Härtel in Germany. But they would only publish it if he gave it to them for free, because they said, hey, you could use, basically you could use the publicity, and he agreed. And the piece did end up being the great calling card of his youth, along with the first C minor piano quartet. It's a piece that in fact it inspired Saint-Saëns to become a great champion of Fauré's work, which was incredibly important in Europe. The program ends with a little more Dvorak, because you can never have too much Dvorak. This is his second piano quartet in E flat major. This was written shortly before his time in America, but around the time of his famous piano quintet. This is Dvorak at his most bold, triumphant. The perfect, to me, this period is sort of a perfect synthesis of the Brahmsian Dvorak that you find in his earlier works, with the folk-inspired, very comfortable Dvorak you find in his later works. This is a very, very triumphant, bold, beautiful piece of music, full of incredible charm and beauty. Really one of my favorite things. Looking forward to that very, very much. I realized that I need to talk about our concert in Volunteer Park, which I believe. Hey, Steve, can you help me out? That's the day before, right?
Yes, Saturday the 18th.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, that will be the program will be preceded by a community play along which any of you that play instruments, I hope you'll join us for a wonderful Mozart divertimento. That will be at 6:30 p.m. And then the main program has, I'm going to just let you guess, Dvorak. It has his Terzetto in C major, which is a string trio, but interestingly not a string trio as we generally think of it, with a violin, viola, and cello, but rather with two violins and viola. And then that has also the piece I spoke about earlier, the Joseph Suk Piano Quartet, Opus 1. So tell your friends, I'm sure most of you have probably been to these Volunteer Park concerts in the past. They're so fun. I think it's always a very, very special night, and it's wonderful seeing so much of the community turn out for these. So please tell your friends, and let's have a good show. Okay, going back to where was I here? We're now moving on to the program of Tuesday, July 21st. That's also at Town Hall, Seattle. That is starting the pre-concert with a pre-concert by Enon Barnaton, where he is playing music of Ravel and Stravinsky. Actually, a fantastic arrangement for solo piano by Guido Agosti of the Firebird Suite by Stravinsky. Main program starts with the Shostakovich Piano Trio number 1, Opus 8. This is a piece like when I was growing up, not that I'm that old, but when I was growing up, there was the Shostakovich Piano Trio, and that was his Opus 67, a famous, very large scale, profound work. And when I was probably in my 20s, all of a sudden I became aware of some Piano Trio number 1. I thought, well, what is this? Well, it turns out it's actually a piece that Shostakovich wrote very, very young. It was written around the time, and when I say around the time, literally around the composition of his first symphony, which was taking his major efforts at the time. But this first piano trio was a piece that was written with great enthusiasm in his youth, but then completely forgotten about and not published until many, many years later. In fact, the last 21 bars, I think it is, of the piano part have never turned up. So a student of his had to sort of reconfigure those. But in the past couple of decades, it's become a great favorite in the piano trio repertoire. It's not a large piece, but it's a beautiful piece that I'll mention coming up, that we have some other early Shostakovich that is maybe tied in a certain sense to this early piano trio. That program moves on to the first string quartet by George Walker. George Walker only died a few years ago. Was one of the great sort of deans of American music. He lived a very long and really extraordinary life. The piece, his first string quartet, though, is a very early piece that he wrote when he was 24 years old. He was still a student at the Curtis Institute, and it's a piece that is unquestionably inspired by the quartet of Samuel Barber, which I spoke about earlier, which was only written about 10 years before George Walker's piece. It's a piece where the outer movements, as brilliant as they are, really serve primarily as the frame for a truly extraordinary second movement, like in the case of the Barber. The second movement of this string quartet is what gives it the nickname lyric, because in 1990, George Walker arranged, so many, many years later, let's see, that'd be about, yeah, I think that he wrote the piece, I believe, in 1944 or something like that. And so it was many years later that, yeah, he arranged it for string orchestra as his lyric for strings. And this is a piece that has become almost an anthem in American or orchestral musical circles. The lyric for strings really generated a renewed interest in some of George Walker's earlier works, because he became a very musically progressive composer, integrating many of the more, or I should say, maybe we can say some of the less friendly musical influences of the 20th century. But this piece, as you will hear, is a deeply lyrical piece that has its roots in Romanticism, but has a uniquely American flavor. George Walker, yeah, a real American treasure, the first African American composer to win a Pulitzer Prize, a really fascinating character. That program ends with the Johannes Brahms Piano Quartet Number One in G minor. This is an early piece of Brahms. This is a great favorite. It has his Hungarian or quote gypsy flavored last movement. It's a real tour de force. This was a piece that comes from this early period of his life, not long after he had, or not too long after he had been introduced to the Schumanns, and it was in fact Clara Schumann who played the incredibly virtuosic piano part for the piece, for the piece's debut. Moving on to Friday, July 24th, also at Town Hall, Seattle. Our pre-concert is featuring the musicians from our Youth Academy for Chamber Music. So this is always a fun event when we get to feature these wonderful young musicians. We have music by Mozart and Mendelssohn, and there's one other I'm forgetting. But anyway, it's going to be terrific. We're so proud of these extraordinary young people that have been doing so well at the Academy. The main program starts with a piece by Astor Piazzolla, uh, the Argentine composer, well known as the composer to maybe fuse concert hall music with tango music. And this is, in fact, a piece he wrote called Histoire du Tango. It was a piece originally written for flute and piano, but is probably more often played on the violin. It was written in 1985, published 1986. Um, it was Piazzolla's life work, I guess you'd say, to bring the tango music out of the dance halls and the bordellos and into the concert halls. But he was a very well trained classical composer, worked with Nadia Boulanger, but he was really devoted to this music of his native Argentina. And so he wrote this piece that, as its name would suggest, follows sort of the history of the tango coming out of fairly humble origins, shall we say, into music of the concert hall. And the four parts of this piece are the Bordello 1900, Cafe 1930, Nightclub 1960, and Modern Day Concert. So you can hear the development of the music, and by the time you get to the end, you hear the influences of people like Bartok and Stravinsky, and it's a great tour de force, and that will be with Karen Gomio and Paige Roberts Malloy. And Karen is a great champion of Piazzolla's music. She's a tango dancer herself, and this is a real passion project for Karen, so it's going to be very, very special. We move on to a piece by John Adams, the great American composer John Adams. The, not the not the not the president. This is a piece called Shaker Loops for string septet. This piece was actually written sort of in a modular way, I guess, in its first version, where it could be played for different sizes of group, but it can either be done with an orchestra or cut down to a string septet, which is actually the way I prefer it. Uh, John Adams was working a lot with loops at this point in his compositional life, which is to say music that repeats with loops over and over and over. And he got thinking about the sort of the ecstasy that can be created from these repeated looping gestures, and he got thinking about the Shakers. Who it's kind of a fascinating bit of history. This religious sect that was formed in the mid 1700s, and that became known as the Shakers for the way that they would during their religious events they would yeah find themselves in these states of religious ecstasy, shaken all around, and yeah. So this was not exactly his inspiration for when he started writing the piece, but rather it was it was something that came out of the process of working with these loops. It's a very trance-inducing, hypnotic, very exciting piece of music, and I'm really looking forward to playing in that one myself. And you know, John Adams has at this point kind of one of the great elder statesman of American music, but this was a piece written during his incredible youth. You know, the music he came out with in the '70s was so groundbreaking, and I think that you know, here we are 50 years later, able to understand how monumentally influential it was, not just on American music, but music in general. That program ends with the Piano Trio Number 1 by Franz Schubert. Schubert's another composer with a tragically short life. He wrote both of his piano trios right at the end of his life. This piece was written in 1827 into 1828, which was the year he died. It's a large scale work that is well known and incredibly beloved for its mix of incredible beauty and sparkling virtuosity and wonderful instrumental writing. You know, it's really one of the absolute most justly beloved pieces in the repertoire. Our closing concert we have on Sunday the 26th, also at Town Hall. We've got a quite an epic pre-concert where we have Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, performed by pianist George Lee. Then the main program starts with the Shostakovich Two Pieces for String Octet, and I was talking earlier about the early Shostakovich with his first symphony and this first piano trio that lay unplayed for so many years. These two pieces for string octet are, I remember clearly when I was introduced to these pieces by Toby Sachs. They are at times so the first piece is so moving and beautiful, and the second piece is so completely bonkers. It's really quite something. It's very, very fun to play and very, very fun to listen to. It's kind of a big party up there, so we're going to have a lot of fun with that. Second piece is the Grieg Cello Sonata. And I'll just mention, I haven't talked a lot about the wonderful musicians that we have coming this summer, but we have a fabulous cellist named Ken Olson, who will be with us for the first time. Ken is one of my favorite American cellists out there. Associate principal cello of the Chicago Symphony, wonderful musician, and yeah, he'll be playing that sonata with George Lee. Grieg didn't leave us with a lot of chamber music: three violin sonatas, a cello sonata, sort of a piano quartet, but this has all the hallmarks of Grieg's wonderful music, full of almost fairy tale like melodic inspiration. Just a beautiful, beautiful piece. And we finished that program and the festival with a very special thing. This is the original version of Aaron Copland's celebrated Appalachian Spring, which was subtitled Ballet for Martha because it was written for Martha Graham. Appalachian Spring was actually the third of Copland's great ballets that really left his mark as a composer in what we now think of as sort of the Americana style. In fact, Copland wrote so much music in a lot of different styles. He was kind of a musical chameleon, and particularly in his later years, as he was incorporating elements of more of an experimental nature into his writing. But with Billy the Kid, Rodeo, and Appalachian Spring, he created a sound world that we think of as being so distinctly American, and has filled a unique role in our lives. You know, I think we probably can all remember the television commercials of beef, it's what's for dinner, you know, and things like that. You know, we hear these sounds of Americana, and the Appalachian Spring famously uses the Shaker hymn. We're back on Shakers again, of Simple Gifts. So this piece was commissioned for the Martha Graham Dance Company. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 1945. It's premiered in 1944. And the reason that it was originally written for these 13 instruments is it was premiered at the auditorium at the Library of Congress, which is not a big space, and he didn't have the room. So, though in later years he arranged the piece for orchestra, and Copland, he knew he had a hit on his hands, so it's been arranged in different sizes and different ways, and composers in the 20th century would often republish a piece just as a way of renewing the copyright to make sure that they still keep getting paid. But this original version is, I think, where we can hear this music in its purest form, and it's going to be great, great, great fun. I think a great cap on a celebration of well, a great summer festival, but also the incredible musical history and culture we have in the United States of America. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and there you have it. I hope you're as excited for this as I am. I think it's gonna be a great festival. If there's nothing else, I'll start my day here in Seoul. I hope you all have a fantastic Tuesday evening in Seattle or wherever you are, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you all very soon.